Hello, it's Lynn Watts here with Wyatt the Wonder Dog Books. And today in this video, I'm going to talk about counselor introductions. So it's the beginning of the school year, and part of your job is to get to know um, all the students, which, depending on the size of your school, may be somewhat of a daunting task. So, what do you do? How do you go about doing that? Well, the thing that I always did was scheduled classroom introductions. Certainly, there's some other things that you can do, and I'll talk about those in just a minute. But I think one of the most effective ways to get the word out about who you are and what you do is to schedule a time with each individual classroom that you're going to be working with and use that time to give an introduction to who you are. Now, certainly, as you know, the grades go up, there will be many students who, when you show up, they already know who you are and what you do, but you want to tailor your presentation to the specific age of the students. So you, even though maybe they know something about you, you want to maybe present it in a slightly different way, or you want to, if you're talking with, let's say, a third, fourth, or fifth grade class, you can certainly begin by asking them, what do you think I do? After all, you've been here, maybe you've been here since kindergarten, perhaps. And what is it I do? And then you can let students get involved in defining what they know about you, and then you can either clarify that or add to it. But certainly for the early grades, I think that you want to be very clear about what your role is in the school and how you can help students, and what they would need to do if they had some sort of problem. So, what are the benefits of being in the classroom for those introductions? Well, I think one is it makes you visible right off the bat. And I usually try to do it early on, like the first week if possible. I know teachers are very busy that first week, but they're also establishing their routine and introducing themselves and introducing students to everything about the school. So I think it fits in best there. If you wait too late, then it's harder to get in, and students might already be having some issues that you needed to deal with. So do it early, establish your visibility, and begin developing that trust relationship. I think it sets expectations about who you are and how you can help. Um, and you want to define that pretty clearly. I usually would do it with some examples. Students may have all kinds of ideas about a counselor. They may have had a camp counselor and think maybe you're going to do crafts with them. I think I mentioned one time in a classroom, what does a counselor do? And that was something somebody brought up. So certainly you might do some sort of craft as part of a small group or in a classroom, but generally your role is not um, uh, that of doing crafts. It's to help students solve problems. So I always like to help students identify the kinds of problems that you might work with, and give them some pretty concrete examples. The other thing is that it normalizes talking to the counselor. So it's not just the bad kids that have to go to a counselor. It can be anybody that has just the kind of interpersonal problems that we all have. And you can certainly give some examples of how you could help with that. I think it reduces some of the stigma of asking for help if you are make yourself very available and visible, and so you become and someone that it's easy, they know it's easy to talk to and easy to make a referral to. And finally, it gives every student equal access to who you are, not just those students who have the gumption, I guess, to ask to see you, but also not just the ones that teachers feel like you need to see, but rather any student who feels like you could be helpful for them. So the things that I would usually talk about in those early introductory sessions are what the counselor role is, as I said already, specifically what you do and how they will see you interacting with students throughout the school year. And part of that, of course, is that I would let them know I'll be in your classroom on a regular basis and we'll be having lessons on, and give them some ideas of that. Um, I also would define differences between individual counseling, group counseling, and classroom counseling, and let them know that those are all three things that I would do, could do, and that they might be involved in. And as I've already mentioned, I would give specific examples of common concerns, things like friendship problems, or perhaps different issues in terms of feelings, anxiety, depression, those kinds of things, being worried. I always talked about the issue of confidentiality. That's kind of a hard topic to explain sometimes to younger students, but I think if you begin in the younger grades and then, as you know, you continue meeting with students throughout the grade levels, then they come to understand what confidentiality is and how that shows up. And I would usually give an example of what the situation might be, the kind of situation, not specifics here, but the generally a simple explanation is if I was felt like somebody might be hurt in a situation, then that might be some one that I would need to share with somebody else who could help and make sure that they were safe. So find an explanation that works for you, that you feel comfortable with, and that clearly describes what confidentiality is. You want to describe the referral process. So if somebody wants to talk to you, what do they need to do? Do they write a note? Is there, a digital process somehow where they get in touch with you? How does that work? And once they do get in touch with you, how long might it take for you to get to see them? All right. Like, are you immediately going to come get them? Or perhaps you have a regular schedule of classrooms, and so it might be the end of the day. Maybe you have a specific time of day when you typically meet with students, maybe the end of the day, the beginning of the day, right before school. Give them some ideas of what they could expect. And then you want to maybe give them a few ideas of what it would be like, how you will get them from the classroom. Will the teacher just send them? Will you come by and pick them up, so to speak, because maybe they don't know where your office is, that kind of thing. So give them just a full view of what they could expect if they request to talk with you, and what the flow of that might be, how to go about it. So that would be a classroom lesson. You could add in some other things, such as some coping strategies, or, for a typical problem, anxiety or whatever, if you want. My guess is most of what we just talked about is going to take most of the classroom time that you have, at least that first session, and you'll get to those tools and strategies later. There's some other ways, I think, though, that are very useful sometimes in meeting with students, and it can be much more informal, and really good ways to see students in their environment as opposed to you being a teacher up in front of the classroom. One is to go to lunch. Just show up at lunch, maybe sit with some students, talk with them, observe what they're, talking about. This is especially helpful, I think, if you know of somebody who's having some friendship problems or is having trouble getting along, maybe at lunch or maybe at recess, which is another time when you could potentially, rather than pulling them from lunch or from recess, rather be there and kind of work with them within the environment. So I think those are just some examples. You might potentially even visit them during some other classroom if that's where the problem or the trouble seems to be happening. For instance, if it's in PE, maybe you're going to go and observe them in there, or, again, try and interact in some way if you check that out with the teacher ahead of time to make sure that you weren't interfering with their regular kind of system in the classroom. The other thing that I think you want to make sure to do in terms of introductions is to introduce yourself to the teachers. All right. So you can certainly do that one-on-one by going by and catching teachers early on during the work days before school starts. You could also schedule a time to go to grade level meetings and use that as a time to talk about any concerns that they have, the typical kind of referrals that they feel like they might make, and for you to talk some about your role and what you would expect from them, and let them know how to go about referring a student and what they could expect back from you if they referred a student. Would you then maybe later meet with them and give them some ideas about, better ways to work with that student, to help that student be more successful or to get along better with others, that sort of thing. So give them some ideas about follow-up and what you would be allowed. Of course, there's a confidentiality issue, but I would always talk with a student and say, I think your teacher could help out in this situation. Do you mind if I talk to her about what's going on? And often students are pretty happy with that. In fact, they value the help of a teacher within a situation. And occasionally they feel like, no, that's going to single them out in some way. Of course, you wouldn't want to do that. But um, many times the things that you deal with are really a interaction problem. And just talking individually with the student makes it much harder to solve a problem than if you could gather together a group of students, or you can work with the teacher in terms of what they need and so on. So I think that's pretty obvious, but letting teachers know what to expect in terms of follow-up. All right. So the beginning of the year is a very important time of the year. It's important for students, but it's also important for us as counselors to really take advantage of that time to establish our role and to get involved early on, not wait to get a referral or wait for somebody to call on us, but be very proactive in terms of meeting students and meeting teachers. As always, thanks for everything you do to benefit students, and thanks so much for listening.